I have a very deep belief that founders are experts in our respective domains, but we do not necessarily know how to maximise the value of our businesses prior to an exit. It was the pitch, give us 50% of that business, we're going to build out that delivery capability, we're going to case study the backside out of the work that we do, we're going to deliver like absolute gods, and then we are going to get this thing sold.
Welcome to the Exited Founder Podcast. My name is Brian Dukes, a two-time bootstrapped founder and managing partner at Exitwise. Today, I'm joined by Rachel Murphy, an absolute powerhouse of an entrepreneur. In our conversation, we dive into Rachel's early entrance into entrepreneurship, the evolution of the two exceptional businesses she built and successfully sold, and how each learned lesson has contributed to the inspiration for her latest venture, the Grafter. I was so thankful to have her in studio with us and hope you enjoy our conversation. Now on to the show. Welcome to the Exited Founder Podcast. Rachel, thank you for being here. Spoiler alert, we've got some big news to talk about at the end of today's show. But I think what we really want to dive into at the beginning here, you are an exited founder on the Exitwise platform with us, helping founders build their businesses towards a future exit and supporting them through the full journey. I think I'd love to rewind all the way to the beginning of your path as a founder, someone who's been through multiple exits, those experiences, and what has led you to this point today.
No pressure then, Brian.
Yeah.
No pressure at all. So delighted to be on the pod. And I guess if I go, not all the way back, but if I go a reasonable chunk of time back, I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And if I look even at, being kind of a child and teenage years, there was always side hustles, businesses and creativity. And we were always encouraged to do that. We're a family of entrepreneurs. And from a really young age, I think probably the best gift I was ever given by my parents is an insane amount of confidence, which may or may not come as a surprise. And for me, I guess, that was car washing businesses and employing my mates when I was like 12. I was always trying to avoid the actual work mind. I was happy to do the deal and then get everybody else putting their shift in, which is a recurring theme.
I hear that.
And then I built first company when I was early 20s. And I built it mainly because I was at that time project manager. And I was implementing a web-based social care piece of software. And the company that built the software was brilliant, but I felt strongly that if we didn't have the ability to have a team implement it, it was never going to get adopted properly. I remember pitching the owner of the company and I said, listen, I really think you need that professional services capability. And he obviously thought, who the fuck is this? And I was probably 22, 23. And I said, you're going to have to build this capability. And he was adamant the software was brilliant and that was not needed. And so I said, listen, wherever you sell that software, I'm going to rock up and I'm going to provide the team that implement it. And fast forward, first 12 months, we did £1 million worth of business. And I guess had kind of proven that point really. And for me, that was it. I really, I had the bug and I absolutely loved it, but I didn't really have much idea at that time. I knew it was consultancy. It's always been consultancy that's appealed to me. And, the business went on, grew the business, ended up building e-learning systems, training academy, and then sold that business in my 20s. And then I kind of decided I actually needed to learn what consultancy probably was, but also I wanted to go back and really get some deep domain expertise. And that probably pulled me back into consultancy, but not my own business for like 15 years.
So a couple things there. So one, I'm fascinated. We found ourselves now in very similar ecosystems, supporting founders, having gone through entrepreneurial journeys. I always tell the story that I was not an entrepreneur growing up. I had very formal employment, doing all the dirty jobs that you never want to do. My dad worked at Ford for 30 years. My mom was a school teacher. I never even knew what an entrepreneur was. And not until I got close to 30 did I get put in a position to be in a place where I was impacting real decisions outside of a big org. And so it's always fascinating me to hear these journeys from childhood.
Yeah.
And then also fascinating, we find ourselves in very, very similar situations. So on your exit, did you get help? How did it come together? Who acquired? Kind of how did you approach that?
So the first one, I got help in the shape and I guess the shape of my father, who ended up in private equity and has he did a lot of large corporate roles, but then ended up selling Gillette to private equity firm and then moved into that world. So he helped with the sale of the first business, and
it's a good mentor, good advisor to have on your team.
A great advisor, but I'm a bit of a pain in the ass to handle, and we're also very similar, and so I'm not great at being told what to do by him, just because the personality is really, really similar. And so it was an interesting learning curve for both of us, I think. But he has that expertise. So it was, I had a hard and fast message, which was, you've listened to very little that I've ever had to say, Rach, but there's some of the stuff in this world you're going to listen to. And that was the steer. So he helped with the first sale.
So before we jump into the second story, then what was your mentality? Where were you at emotionally post transaction? Because we hear so often that you come out of a transaction. Many of us have been there. We've had the good fortune to have good exits, but we emotionally struggle with that next step.
So the first one was really hard, and it was hard not because of the transaction. It was hard because at that time, from a personal perspective, my stepdaughter was sick, and that had actually caused, no, I wouldn't say it prompted the sale, but it certainly sped that process up. We were not ready to sell, and the business was too early to sell. But Charlotte was in intensive care. She had meningitis and septicemia and is a triple amputee as a result of that illness at that time. And so the reality is I didn't have any time to prepare the business for that. It was much more, we've got some offers on the table and my priority has to be family. And we were in the hospital for nearly 12 months. It was a crazy time. So it kind of happened, like getting on a conveyor belt. It just happened. And that transaction went through. And I think for me, in a way, it felt, yes, we sold the business, but it didn't feel like it felt the next time round. That was very orchestrated. That was very planned. It was very built to sell.
Yep.
The first one was just a wave of emotion, obviously.
So you're now, I guess, take us to the beginnings of the second one. We hear a lot of our fellow founders talk about, whether it's confidence, credibility. You obviously have a couple extra dollars in your pocket, some confidence around, wow, I actually can pull this off, and let's do this again. So what led you to that next step? Yeah,
I kind of knew the second time. So if I set the scene, I had done 15 years after that first sale of large-scale turnaround and transformation of really large public and private sector organizations. So if something went horribly wrong around people, process, or technology, I seemed to get a tap on the shoulder to get in and get it sorted. And I loved that kind of work, but I also knew it was probably never going to fulfill me entirely. And so I had just finished leading the patient-facing transformation of the National Health Service for the UK and built the NHS app. And we have 40 million people now using that app. And it's archaic trying to transform something like the National Health Service. Could talk about that for hours, but let's not get sidetracked. But I came out of that, and I felt really strongly that there was a lot of talk from consultancies about how they cared deeply about users and wanting to build user-centered design services for healthcare and for government, but I didn't really see it. And I'd spent a couple of years now buying these services in, and so I thought to myself, I'm going through an expensive divorce. Now must be the time to build a company. And so I actually approached a mate who had been running a recruitment company. And I said, give us 50% of the shares, and I'm going to rock up and we're going to sell this thing in a 5-year period, and we're going to sell it not at the 10% margin you're currently working at, or, hit a 30% margin, and we're going to have an 8-figure exit. And there was a lot of confidence and there was a lot of bravado, and there wasn't a great deal of science applied, but I actually went in and out over a 4.5-year period, and we sold that business, almost not quite to the day, but that was what we did. And we built some unbelievable services for UK government around, we built the COVID home testing service, but we also built platforms for all of the hiring for the National Health Service. So whether you're a brain surgeon or you are a hospital porter, every piece of hiring for every hospital in the UK. And so it was great fun. It was intense, but it was very intentional. It was the pitch: give us 50% of that business. We're going to build out that delivery capability. We're going to case study the backside out of the work that we do. We're going to deliver like absolute gods. And then we are going to get this thing sold. And 2 years in, we had a sell pack. So it was really nailed on. That's
I've heard you tell that story before. And it's really amazing to have, you go back to that word confidence, to have the confidence and vision to say front to back, I know I can build this thing with great value and I can get it sold in a period of time. You beat your estimate.
Yeah, not sure I beat it again now, but yeah.
And we talk a lot about desperation. I guess you've been through a lot personally. You had a lot going on at that time. Like where were you emotionally launching that business? And the level of, we have these moments in time as entrepreneurs where the personal life is pulling you, but you feel like the only way out of this is to find success in what I'm building.
That's a great question. And if I'm brutally honest, my ex-wife's probably going to listen to this and really dislike this response, but it is the truth. I was so pissed off during that divorce, and I thought if ever anything has incentivized me to make a success of something, it is there's something about me. I quite like it scrappy. I quite like it when it's hard going, and so I thought, I am giving this absolutely everything. And I think there was also a bit of, yes, there is some confidence, blind faith, and I wanted to see, could I push me to do it? And I think looking back on that now, I'm slightly gentler with me in my approach, only a tiny bit gentler, but that it was pretty brutal. Expensive divorce, emotional impact. Yeah, let's go and build a business and get it sold with a 5-year period.
But you took that first step, understanding that frustration, the desperation, that emotion that you were getting into.
Yeah, totally. And I also, I think some people, rally the troops in positive environment, and some, feel energized by a pretty chaotic environment. Yeah. And for me at that time, that was the reality. And so I wanted to make something good out of that situation. And I wanted to make a difference. And I probably always have. That's why, it was healthcare, it was government services, it was about, building something that, that truly mattered.
Yeah, I think all of our fellow founders can relate. If you're an entrepreneur, you're building something, it's never clean sailing. There's always multiple motivations that are driving you forward. But to find success, you have to have that aspiration. I think you've heard me tell my story in my first true endeavor. I wasn't as thoughtful as you. I walked into the fire in the fall of 2008, not knowing that the world financial system was about to collapse. And I had that arrogance, that confidence that worst case, I'll go fine. I'll go back to my old kind of stomping grounds.
Yep.
And then realized 3 months in that the world had imploded. And now that level of desperation was far less intentional. It was like, I've totally messed up my entire family situation if I don't figure this out, which that's what ultimately drives these businesses forwards a lot of times.
Yeah, I agree. And that, I think it is that personal motivation. And the bit for me is, competitive family, we're all entrepreneurs. But it's only ever me I'm competing against, really, which is even more disturbing, but true.
Yeah, it is. It is interesting. Of course, we all look around from time to time, but it's the mirror that is our worst enemy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll speak for myself, but
No. I'm wholeheartedly agree, especially after a bad night's sleep, Brian.
yeah, that's right. That's right. So you're on that journey. A couple years in, you're feeling like you obviously have gotten to the point of you've created something of tremendous value. How do you think about the buyer pool, your next steps, organizing? You said this was a much more intentional exit, structured differently.
Yeah, this one was really intentional. And so Cell Pack bottomed out, Data Room bottomed out, had an independent valuation of the business and had gone all the way through knowing the component parts. And I guess because I've always been very collaborative, and so I knew fine well that our buyer was going to be a competitor. And for years before, plenty of people would say to me, why are you partnering, engaging, allowing competitors come to your events? And it was always an intentional point. And for me, I like the collaboration, but I suspected strongly it would be somebody who would be a known quantity. And so it was 2019, it was the back end of the year, and we had the first approach. And I use a methodology, and I teach it, and I've lectured this methodology at universities as well, around creating situational awareness. And it's something called Wardley mapping. And Simon Wardley happened to sit on my last advisory board. And I think the guy's a legend. But it's the best way to make sense of the environment you're in and how the market is moving, and to plot situation awareness for me. And so we have an approach from this company. And I'll be honest, I wasn't particularly keen on him or the company. Spoiler alert. That's the one that I ultimately sold to, but that's another story. But this is the back end of 2019. So they reach out and I think, oh no, I don't think so. But then as we move into 2020, of course, we're into pandemic territory. So we're a healthcare consultancy and we are building national services. We were asked to build the UK's response to COVID-19 digital testing, and it's a crazy time. And then so we're building these systems 24 hours a day. I'm personally shielding at home because I'm very asthmatic, so I'm not even roaming around. And then we're going through this bloody process. So one company reaches out, and at the point that we start building a national solution, I'm suddenly working with the top of the shop from a couple of consultancies and VCs. And as evidence, not particularly shy. So I'm building relationships with these CEOs, and within really short order, one of them sort of says, I think we might be interested in putting an offer in on, and we were not publicly on the market or anything, and the company was called Different. And so we're now in a position where we've got two at the table, and I thought, well, we might as well add a third, because I knew there was another that we'd done some work with who was interested. And then we ran that process, and I and my business partner ran the process. And I guess, my father comes back in from an advice perspective here and said, do not do the deal without that lawyer who's done deals for me before. And I did heed that advice, but it then became a process. But it was an odd period of time. We were on lockdown. I never met the buyer in person. I didn't meet the lawyer in person until 18 months after the transaction. And, at that point, every transaction was still being done, signed. Yes, DocuSign was around and stuff, but the witnessing and everything was all happening in person. But of course, it couldn't during COVID. So it was like a surreal. All of it was surreal. Running the business, shielding, going through a process. And I think I mentioned to you in the car yesterday, also happened to be a remarkably good summer. So I had a great time during this crisis situation. But it was a weird time.
So you used earlier the word intentionality, structuring it in the right way. Obviously, running or thinking about the exit playbook in the way that we both do, it sounds like not only had you been thoughtful about exiting, you'd put the time in to organize, to understand your financials, think about valuation, and be prepared for that transaction before you really started.
I think be prepared as you can until you get into financial DD with people who've got a big team and their whole role is to start chipping. And that was, that was a fascinating process. And we were selling to a listed business and I didn't have frame of reference for that. So, but it was, I think we were probably as prepared as anybody could be, unless that was their day job.
Yeah. And then you mentioned it was a challenging but good summer. A lot of our listeners, they're business owners that are thinking about a future exit, right? They haven't been through it before, and we try not to sugarcoat, right? Going through an M&A process is not always fun. You're running two jobs at one time, right? You're running the business and you're trying to sell. How did you find solace during that process, and how did you work through it?
I found it really hard. So I understood my own business more than I thought was possible going through DD, because you're looking at it through a lens that I'd never even looked at it through. So I cared deeply about the people, about the impact. And it's not that I don't care about the finance. I do. I'm super commercial. But the lenses of how they looked at the finance for me kind of blew my mind a little bit. And so I think that was a steep learning curve. And the running the day-to-day, and I had a chief operating officer in. We were a business about 120 people. We did about 10 mil, but it was there was still a lot of founder dependency, and I think I was probably more involved in BD than I should still have been. I mean, common things that we hear about all the time. So I had one eye on trying to run the day-to-day and more than one eye on that process. But I would still say that I found that easier than I found the emotional impact at the point I did the transaction. That for me was where the rug kind of really got pulled, because I struggled a lot with having a boss and I wasn't particularly keen on the earnout approach. And as is so often the way, the strategy changed overnight, and everything that had been, not everything, but a lot that had been agreed, these things have an amazing ability to shift and change quite quickly. So I found that side of it harder, I think. I found the DD intense. I found it stressful from doing two jobs. And I also found it hard because we were selling to listed that I couldn't be open with my team. We had to have them under legal contract to even share the information, and then not all of them. And so there was bits from a very human perspective that just, me, the person, I found hard going.
And how long did you stick around during that earnout period?
18 months.
18 months.
Yeah, 18 months, and I was locked out in the market for 3 years. So 18 months. Legally, I had to stay, and I lasted 18 months in about 1 minute.
So let's jump forward to today, right? All of those experiences, you decide once again to roll up your sleeves and launch your next venture.
Yeah.
Very much in line with leveraging your experience and everything you've been through and being supportive of our founder community. So I'd love to hear a little bit of that journey to that point and how you thought about that as your next step.
So the bit for me after I sold the business was I went on a bit of a mad one to work out what I wanted to do next. And I went off and did some psychedelics, did some magic mushrooms, trying to find myself, went off. We raised.
Is that part of the playbook?
I would personally encourage it, but it's not. James would say to me, legally, we can't say that it's part of the playbook. And then we went and raised a load of money and went into Ukraine to help out. And in the end, I kind of thought, what am I still searching for here? And my wife said, for Christ's sake, just build another business because it is literally safer. And so I didn't initially want to go and build another business. But what I did want to do was I wanted to build a service that people would pay for. And I thought, I want to build this from scratch myself to see if I still can. I don't know what period of time I thought I was dealing with in my head. It wasn't that long since I just sold a business, but I wanted to go back and build it. And I knew that I had not had the service. It didn't exist in the way that I'd wanted it when I sold Different. We were in pretty good shape, but I would have loved to have had a sounding board, a phone a friend, how do I shape this up? How do I work that? How am I going to feel as I go through that? Just that wrapper around. And so I decided to build out this methodology, this playbook. And it comes from a problem that I'd felt myself, but I have a very deep belief that founders we are experts in our respective domains, but we do not necessarily know how to maximize the value of our businesses prior to an exit. But also, I think there's a lot of time and effort spent on the VC side and on the PE side. And what I mean by that is making sure these are attractive businesses to invest in or ultimately buy. And it felt and it still feels skewed for me. And so I thought, what I'd like to do is create that playbook that helps entrepreneurs to grow their revenue, to raise cash if they want to raise cash, to know how to do an acquisition without being acquired, and to prepare their business for an exit. And so that was what I decided to build. And it was never going to be a business, but then I should know myself better, really.
Of course.
Because it lasted about half an hour. And I was like, oh, that's it. People are up for it. Let's go. So it went from concept to reality quite quickly. And I approached 42 companies with this idea. I think 21 signed up, and I was like,
amazing.
Oh, fuck, let's go. So
where did you get this inspiration for what you call exiteers, exited founders that have been there before?
So a family of entrepreneurs. And it was actually a term that was coined by my parents. And 2 Christmases ago, they trademarked it and gifted it to me at Christmas. And I was
that is amazing.
That is a serious. That's a serious name. Let's go with it. So yeah, they gifted it, and that's where it came from.
And so speaking for you, and there is irony and overlap in the way that we each approach our businesses, but those exited founders, exiteers, these are experienced professionals that have been there and done that. They have not only kind of empathetic expertise in what it feels like to build and sell and prepare, but then they have functional expertise in particular industries that can really be additive to the process. And that's very much how we think about our own business here at Exitwise. So it's ironic that we came to much the same solution, but so deeply believe in that concept of expertise, empathy, experience, kind of industry.
And I totally agree. And I think it's unique. And the reason I think it's unique is because if you think about corporate finance, they are, the hint's in the name, they are totally focused around that aspect of it, and that is not knocking it at all. Same from an investment bank perspective. But the bit that I think you get with your exited founder, in the way we get with our exiteer, is they've rolled their sleeves up. They have built and sold a business, at least one before. They've been in the trenches, and they know what it is like trying to run these businesses. So they have the empathy, but they have the skills. But also, they are trained, experienced around coaching, mentoring, and consultancy. It is a really unique proposition. But I think that ability to have the technical, have the business, and have the emotional as well and that's the bit that just for me isn't spoken enough. It is so emotional. We are all people building these businesses, and it's a bloody roller coaster in the day, let alone in that journey when you're going through the process of selling a business. So for me, it's an essential service in the way that a lawyer and corporate finance, it's the core team. It has to be to make this work.
And exiting a business that you have built is also such a unique skill set. It is, unfortunately, too many business owners do not find success in M&A. They don't find that end. So yes, there are necessary roles on your M&A team, but having someone, in our experience, something we deeply believe in, having someone on your team that has truly been through that front to back, it's a teammate that may not bring every functional skill of an investment banker or M&A attorney, but they're bringing so much to the party that I find those late night phone calls are some of the most valuable as you're going through that process.
Yeah, totally agree.
So jump into the punchline, for those that have stuck around for 30 minutes.
And that better be everyone, Brian.
That better be everyone. You're obviously, have flown in this week from London. We this morning penned our global partnership to support our fellow founders in their journey from building, growing, raising capital, all the way to exit. And I think the irony of the whole partnership and the way that we have been building two separate companies in much the same light is that we're also covering very different parts of that journey towards exit, right? The Grafter, your business, very focused on properly preparing, structuring, supporting the process towards that exit. And we are on the back half of that conversation to bring them to full transaction and through a conclusion of their exit. And so, for everybody listening, we're obviously really, really excited for the partnership. We now have the ability to support business owners and builders and entrepreneurs really in any phase from virtually start.
Yep.
And, really, really excited to have you here in the US, appreciative of the partnership and the time. And just really excited to get started.
Yeah, you and me both, mate. Can't wait. Thank you.
Well, for all of our listeners, if they want to get a hold of you, hear more, talk to you more about, how you can be additive to the process, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Spend my life on social media. So thegrafter.com is the website, LinkedIn, post on a almost hourly basis, and apparently, rather terrifyingly, on TikTok, but don't try and engage with me there.
Amazing. So again, welcome to the Exit Founder Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.
Brill. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Exited Founder Podcast. For business owners who are looking to sell or want to ensure they're exit ready, our team is here to help you maximize your outcome. So connect with us at exitwise.com today.